In a previous video, I explained in general the concept of the zero trust. And there was a lot of information there, but because the zero trust concept is so obscure for many people and there's so much information, I wanted to make this video specifically for the Security Plus certification, just to make sure that you are ready to answer those questions and what is it that the Security Plus emphasizes. These are the key components of Zero Trust that you must understand in order to answer the question for the Security Plus. So first, I'm going to give you an overall picture, if you want to call it, of these components, and then we're going to talk about each of this in detail and how they interact with each other. So this is according to NIST. So this is a picture from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. We will talk a lot more about NIST in later sessions. But for now, so the Zero Trust for the Security Plus, these are the things that you need to know. It's divided into two uh, big components: the control plane, right, and the data plane, divided by this line over here. So the control plane, in turn, is composed of the policy decision point, or PDP, it's called in some documentation. This policy decision point is then divided into the policy engine and the policy administrator. And we'll explain that in a little bit, how these things work. Okay. Also part of this, actually part of both the control plane and the data plane, is the data sources. In terms of the data sources, we have the continuous diagnostics management system. We have industry compliance that we need to adhere to. We need threat intelligence. We need to know what's going on in the world of cybersecurity. So we need to have a lot of threat intelligence, and obviously it relies on activity logs. So all of these are data sources for both the data plane and the control plane. So here is the control plane, right? In terms of the data plane, well, so we have a subject that needs to use a system, right? It could be a user, it could be an application, it could be any entity, right? And obviously, in terms of the zero trust, everything is untrusted first, right? Then we have the one of the major component of the data plane is the policy enforcement agent. This is the agent that will determine whether this uh, subject and systems, right? So we get devices and users, whether these are trusted or not. If it's trusted, well, okay, then that means that you can access enterprise resources, because in the ultimate instance, that's what we need. We need those enterprise resources. That's what the data plane is. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, again, it covers both the control plane and the data plane. We need to have data access policies. We need a public key infrastructure. We need ID management or identity management. We have talked about identity many times. And we also need a SIM system, security, information and event management systems. So these are, if you want to have zero trust, you need to have these technologies. You need to have this system. Okay. So this is the overall picture, how the components, the components of zero trust. Next, we will explain how each of these interact with each other. The policy enforcement point, or PEP, that we just talked about. So this PEP is the component that enforces the decisions made by the policy engine. So it sits between the untrusted entity right here, the untrusted and the trusted entity, right? And which is again, this is part of the enterprise resources that we just talked about, and basically, this acts as a gatekeeper, that guard that we kind of talked about in a previous video. Now, the function of this is to grant or denied access based on the policies defined by the policy engine. So the policies are defined in the policy engine. For example, when a user attempts to access a resource, the PP, the policy enforcement point, checks with the policy engine, and based on the response, it allows or denies access. The policy administrator manages and updates access policies based on evolving business needs, regulatory requirements, and threat intelligence. It configures the rules and conditions that the policy engine uses to make access decisions. The data sources, right, that are feeding the control plane. First, we have a CDM system, continuous diagnostics and mitigation. This provides continuous monitoring of security posture, helping identify potential weaknesses in areas for improvement in real time. Then we have industry compliance, which provide guidelines and requirements that the organization must adhere to, such as GDPR, HIPAA, um, PCI DSS, and many other, which feed into the policy creation and management processes. Threat intelligence, which provide up-to-date information on current threats and vulnerabilities that inform and adapt security policies, and activity logs, which are logs of all user activities and systems events that help analyze behavior, detect anomalies, and inform access control decisions. Let's now take a look at the second major component of Zero Trust, which is the data plane. The data plane is responsible for enforcing the security policies defined by the control plane. It consists of the following components. One, the policy enforcement point, PEP, as we discussed before. The policy enforcement point is the component that enforces the decision made by the policy engine. It sits between the untrusted entity, which could be a subject or systems, and the trusted resources. Uh, for example, the enterprise resource that you need to access, and act as a gatekeeper. The main function is to grant or deny access based on the policies defined by the policy engine. For example, when a user attempts to access a resource, the PEP checks with the policy engine, and based on the response, it either allowed or denied access. The data and access policy defines a specific rules for accessing data, ensuring that only authorized users can perform specific actions such as read, write, delete on the specific data. For example, a policy might dictate that only finance department employees can access financial data stored in SharePoint. The PKI, or public key infrastructure, provides the cryptographic keys and certificates necessary for securing communications and verifying identities in the zero trust model. For example, in Microsoft environments, PKI is used to issue and manage digital certificates for users and devices. ID management. ID management, which is identity management, it manages user identities and enforces authentication requirements. It ensures the right users have access to the right resources at the right times. For example, Azure Active Directory, which actually now it's called Microsoft Entra, handles user identity and access management across Microsoft Cloud services. And then we have the SIEM system, security information and event management, which collects, analyzes, and correlates log data from various sources to detect threats and provide access, rather alerts, for suspicious activity. For example, Microsoft Sentinel, a SIEM tool, is used to monitor security logs and alert on potential threats. Now that we have looked at all these components and we have a better understanding what these components are, let's take a look at how these components interact with each other. So first, we have an access request flow. Let's say we have the subject system that we talked about in the data plane. So we have a user or a device that makes an access request to an enterprise resource, for example, an internal application on data. The request is intercepted by the policy enforcement point, PEP, which is configured to treat all access requests as untrusted by default. Imagine a user working from home, working remotely, accessing a request, accessing a company over the internet. Traditionally, we would need a VPN. The user would connect to a VPN and then go through all these things. But again, in Zero Trust, you don't need to have a VPN if you have all these components in place. So step two, the decision-making process. The policy enforcement point component consults the policy decision point PDP. Remember, all of these are components of that program, of that CASB, right? Zero Trust program. Uh, so the policy enforcement point consults the PDP, consisting of the policy engine and policy administrators, like we just discussed. And then the policy engine evaluates the request against the existing policies, which consider inputs like the activity logs, the compliance requirements, threat intelligence, and the data access policies that we saw before. Well, finally, the enforcement and response point of this, so based on the decision from the policy engine, the policy enforcement point either grants or denies access to the enterprise resource. If access is granted, it is closely monitored for compliance and anomaly detection using tools like a SIM system that we just also talked about. So, in summary, in this zero trust model, the control plane defines and manages security policies while the data plane enforces these policies. Microsoft tools such as Azure AD or Microsoft Entra, which is the new name, Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Security Center, uh, conditional access, right, provides a practical implementation of zero trust principles by continuously verifying identities, managing policies dynamically, and enforcing strict access controls to protect enterprise resources. Now, obviously, there are many players in the zero trust arena. Microsoft is one of them. Microsoft has almost all the components, if you want to call it, with the suite of the Microsoft Defender product, that it's capable to do this depending on your environment. Obviously, you may need other technologies and products out there. And the reason why we talk about Microsoft, it's not because we prefer Microsoft necessarily, although I am a big Microsoft guy myself. But Microsoft, it's known by most people. There's a lot of companies out there that you probably never heard of that have this that could help implementing this zero trust architecture. But again, so Microsoft, it's well known, and then that's why I use Microsoft as an example. But remember, the goal of this class is to pass a Security Plus certification. Now, obviously, in my classes, I don't just teach about what you need to pass. I also teach you stuff for the real world, right? And learning in general. So that's why I go really deep into these topics, into all my topics. Most classes out there will just give you a couple of key points that you need to pass a couple of questions. That's not my point. My point here is that you really have a solid understanding of this point, and that's why we go so deep. But anyway, so this is what you need. At least this last portion, you need this in order to pass those Security Plus questions. But if you really need to have a deep understanding about the zero trust, then I encourage you to, obviously, if you're taking this class, you're going to watch all my videos. But if you have just started watching this video, you should watch the videos previous to this one to have a deep understanding about zero trust. Well, thank you. And again, as always, if you find this useful, please um, give me a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel so that you are informed when new content comes around. Thank you, and I hope that you follow with the next session.